The spotlight hits the head table blinding and golden, but I am Mable Doyle, and I am sitting in the dark. The air smells of expensive lilies and old lies. I spent $90,000, my surgery fund, my future, to build this perfect night for my sister, desperate to buy a seat at a table that never wanted me. They think the silence in the back of the room is submission. They don't know my hand is resting on a folder of receipts that will turn this wedding into an audit. They think I am broken, but they are about to learn that the bank always wins. Like, share, comment, and subscribe to our channel. We always appreciate the time you spent here with us. The hotel room was too quiet. It was 5 in the morning, the kind of silence that rings in your ears. The air conditioning hummed a low mechanical breath that seemed to be the only living thing in the room besides me. My dress hung on the back of the door. It was pale blue silk and expensive. In the dim light coming from the gap in the curtains, it looked less like a garment and more like a surrender flag. I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling, tracing the patterns in the plaster, trying to ignore the knot in my stomach that had been tightening for 3 months. I rolled over and looked at the nightstand. My leg brace sat there. It was a custom carbon fiber piece, sleek and black, battered at the edges from daily use. I touched the cold material. It was a habit, a grounding technique, and a warning. It reminded me of limits. It reminded me of what broke and what held together. Next to the brace, my phone lit up. A single text message from my mother. Proud of you. Couldn't do this without you. XX. The words felt sweet on the first read. That is how bait works. It catches you in the soft part of your throat before you feel the hook. I put the phone down face down so I wouldn't have to see the glow. I needed to get up. I needed to strap the brace on, shower, and become the dutiful sister. But my mind drifted back, pulled by the gravity of the mistake I had made. It went back to the kitchen table 90 days ago where the trap was set. It had been a Tuesday. My parents had invited me over for dinner, which was rare enough to be suspicious. Usually dinner invitations were reserved for Claire, the golden child, the bride-to-be. I was the practical one, the one called for airport runs or tech support. But that night the table was set with the good linens, roast chicken, wine. My father poured me a glass before I'd even sat down. They were soft. That was the first red flag. My father, typically a man of loud opinions and sharp interruptions, was listening. My mother touched my hand twice before the salad was served. Claire sat across from me, looking fragile and teary-eyed, playing the role of the overwhelmed victim to perfection. They didn't ask for a gift. They were too smart for that. They knew I didn't have gift money. They asked for a partnership. It's a liquidity issue, Mable, my father had said, leaning forward, his elbows on the table. He used his business voice, the one he used to close deals on commercial real estate. The Midtown project is tied up in zoning. My cash is locked in escrow until the permit clears. It's a formality, but the wedding vendors, they're sharks. They want upfront payments now, or we lose the venue. We lose the caterer. Claire sniffed, dabbing at her eyes. I can't postpone it, Mable. The deposits, we'd lose everything. It's my dream. It's a temporary front, my mother added, sliding a plate of potatoes toward me. Just a bridge. 30 days, maybe 60. Once the Midtown escrow clears, we refinance and pay you back with interest. Plus the wedding gifts. You know how generous your uncle is. That alone covers half. They watched me. They knew exactly what they were asking for. They knew about the account. I had $90,000 sitting in a high-yield savings account. It wasn't just money. It was 5 years of overtime. It was skipped vacations. It was living in a studio apartment the size of a closet so I could save for a down payment on a house with no stairs. It was my surgery fund for when the brace wouldn't be enough anymore. It was my escape hatch. I looked at them. I saw the desperation, but I also saw the expectation. You are the responsible one, their eyes said. You are the one who can take the hit. I need that money for the house, I said. My voice sounded thin in the warm kitchen. It's an investment, Dad said quickly. He pulled a piece of paper from his jacket pocket. It wasn't a napkin scribble. It was a formal promissory note drafted on his letterhead. Interest rates, repayment schedule, signatures. It looked real. It felt safe. We treat this like a business deal. You're the bank, Mable, and the bank always wins. I signed. I didn't sign because I trusted the business logic. I signed because for the first time in years, I was at the center of the table. I signed because I wanted to belong to them, as much as Claire did. I hated that about myself. I hated that my dignity had a price tag, and apparently it was $90,000. The change was immediate. The kindness started the next day. It wasn't real affection. It was transactional maintenance. Mom started calling me every morning. How did you sleep? Did you see the florist's email? Dad would send short texts. You've got courage, kid. Real grit. Claire included me in the group chats with the bridesmaids, asking my opinion on napkin folds and playlist curations. But the pattern was clear if I looked closely. The praise came when I wrote a check. I wrote a check for the venue, $25,000. You're a lifesaver, Mable Mom said. I wired money to the caterer, $30,000. Best sister ever, Claire texted. I paid the florist, the lighting crew, the band deposit. Each transaction chipped away at my freedom. The balance in my savings account dropped like a stone, $80K, $50K, $10K. When I hesitated over the extra charge for the crystal glassware, the silence was instant. Mom didn't call for 2 days. The group chat went dead. The message was loud and clear. Pay up or you're out. So I paid. I bought my way back in invoice by invoice. I kept the receipts. I don't know why initially, maybe just habit. I printed every vendor email, every confirmation code, every "thank you for your payment, Mable" reply. I kept the promissory note in a fireproof box under my bed. By the time the wedding week arrived, I felt hollowed out. I was a walking checkbook treated with the careful handling one gives to a loaded weapon or a very expensive piece of machinery. I sat up in the hotel bed and swung my legs over the side. I strapped the brace on, tightening the Velcro straps until they bit into my skin. The pain was grounding. I stood up and walked to the window. The city was waking up below. I thought about Ethan Hale. I had run into him yesterday in the hotel lobby. I hadn't seen him in 10 years, not since we were kids, running around the dusty backlots of our father's construction sites. He was in town for business, he said. His company, Hale Logistics, was a key partner for my father's firm. He was here for the wedding, but mostly he was here to finalize a contract renewal with Dad. He had been standing near the concierge desk, looking out of place in a suit that fit him too well. When he saw me, he didn't do the thing most people do. He didn't look at the brace, then at my face, then give me the pity smile. He just looked at my face. Mable Doyle, he had said, a slow grin spreading across his face. You look like you're ready to negotiate a hostage release. Just a wedding, I had said, gripping my cane. Same thing, he countered. He walked over. He didn't offer to help me stand. He didn't hover. He just stood next to me, a solid, warm presence. I'm having coffee. You look like you need something stronger, but let's start with caffeine. We sat in the corner of the lobby for an hour. I found myself telling him things I hadn't told anyone. Not the money, not yet, but the fatigue. The way the wedding felt like a performance I hadn't rehearsed for. Ethan listened. He didn't interrupt with platitudes. He listened like it cost him something to hear it. He listened the way he probably listened to board reports, scanning for the truth behind the noise. Your dad is pushing hard on this renewal, Ethan had mentioned, almost casually, stirring his black coffee. He's acting like he's got a lot of pressure on the back end. Everything okay with the books? He's got cash tied up in Midtown. I recited the line I'd been fed. Ethan paused, the spoon freezing in his cup. He looked at me, a sharp, calculating look that lasted only a second before he smoothed it over. Right, Midtown. Of course. He knew something. I could see it. But he didn't press. He just treated me like a normal woman. He teased me about my coffee order. He asked about my job. He treated my body like it was just a body, not an inspirational story, and not a disgusting failure. It was the first time in 3 months I had felt seen, without a price tag attached. Now standing in the hotel room on the morning of the wedding, that contrast burned. Ethan, a stranger from the past, had given me more respect in 60 minutes than my family had in a lifetime. I looked at the dress again. The surrender flag. My phone buzzed again. Another text this time from the wedding planner copied to me and Mom. Urgent bar tab limit reached last night at the welcome dinner. Need a card on file for the overage before we unlock the bar for the reception. Mom's reply came seconds later. Mabel, can you handle this? We're tied up with hair and makeup. Love you. I stared at the screen. The familiar heavy feeling settled in my chest, the mix of shame and duty. I opened my banking app. I had $4,000 left. That was it. That was the bottom of the barrel. I typed back on it. I walked into the bathroom and turned on the shower, letting the steam fill the room until I couldn't see my reflection in the mirror. I was going to pay. I was going to smile. I was going to walk down the aisle and stand where they told me to stand. But as I stepped into the water, washing away the cold sweat of the morning, I realized something had shifted. The text from Mom didn't make me feel needed anymore. It made me feel used. And for the first time, I wondered what would happen if the ATM stopped spitting out cash. I wondered what would happen if I stopped buying their love and started demanding a receipt. The air in the bridal suite smelled of hairspray and expensive lilies. It was 4 hours before the ceremony, and the room was a hive of frantic energy. My mother was shouting into her phone about the valet service, while Claire sat in front of a lighted mirror, two stylists working on her hair, like engineers constructing a bridge. I was in the corner steaming the bridesmaids' dresses. It was a task usually reserved for a junior assistant, but Claire had insisted. You know how particular I am about creases, she'd said. And you're so good at the details. I was midway through a jade green chiffon gown when Mom snapped her fingers at me. She didn't look up from her phone. Mabel grabbed my iPad. I need to approve the final seating chart, but the app keeps crashing on my phone. Fix it for me, will you? Her iPad was sitting on the velvet ottoman, unlocked, the screen glowing. I picked it up. I had fixed Mom's tech issues 1,000 times before. I went to close the open apps to clear the memory. As I swiped up, a notification banner dropped down from the top of the screen. It was a message from a group chat titled, The Inner Circle. I wasn't in the inner circle. The preview showed my name. I froze. The steamer hissed in my other hand, a hot white noise that suddenly seemed very far away. Against my better judgment, against the training that told me to respect privacy, I tapped the banner. The chat opened. It wasn't just a text. It was a photo. It was a picture of me taken yesterday at the rehearsal. I was walking away from the camera, my gait uneven, the outline of the brace clearly visible beneath my slacks. The caption written by Claire read, "RoboCop reporting for duty. God, can we crop her out of the aisle shots? She walks like a broken lawn chair." I didn't scream. I didn't throw the iPad. I went cold. It was a physical sensation, like ice water being poured into my veins, starting at my neck and spreading to my fingertips. My breath caught in my throat, trapped behind my teeth. I stood there, the steamer dripping onto the carpet, and I scrolled. I shouldn't have scrolled, but I had to know the blast radius. It wasn't one cruel joke. It was a pattern. It was a documented history of contempt. 3 months ago, right after I transferred the first $25,000. Dad. Check cleared. We're good. God, she's so desperate to be involved. It's almost sad. Mom. It's the only way she feels useful, poor thing. At least her bank account is healthy. Keeps her from moping about the leg. 2 months ago. Claire. She's annoying the caterer again about the invoice. Can someone tell her to back off? It's embarrassing. She acts like she's the client just because she signed the check. Mom, I handled it. I told everyone Dad is the primary sponsor, she's just handling the admin. We don't want people thinking we need her help. 1 week ago. A message from Mom to my Aunt Linda forwarded into the chat for a laugh. Linda asked who paid for the flowers. I told her David did, of course. I couldn't bear to tell her Mabel insisted on paying. It makes Mabel look so pathetic, like she has to buy her way into the family. Bless her heart. The words bless her heart hit me harder than the insults about my leg. It was the dismissal. They didn't hate me, they pitied me. They saw my life savings not as a sacrifice but as a fee I was paying to be tolerated. They were taking my future, my house, my surgery fund, my security, and laughing while they cashed it. Mabel. The seating chart, Mom yelled from across the room. I looked up. My mother was frowning, checking her watch. Claire was laughing at something the stylist said. They looked like strangers. No worse. They looked like predators who had already eaten. I closed the app. I didn't fix the seating chart. I walked over and set the iPad down gently on the ottoman. It's not loading, I said. My voice sounded flat, robotic. I need some air. Now, Mom snapped. We have photos in 30 minutes. I need coffee, I said, turning away. I'll be back. I walked out of the suite. I walked down the plush hallway past the guests beginning to arrive, past the staff setting up the gift table. I walked until I reached the lobby bar, which was empty except for one person, Ethan. He was sitting at a high-top table, a laptop open, reviewing a stack of documents. He looked up as I approached. He must have seen something on my face, the pallor, the shock, the vacancy, because he closed his laptop immediately. Mabel, he said. He didn't smile. He stood up. Sit down. I sat. I put my hands on the cold marble of the table. They were shaking. Not a little tremble, but a violent, rhythmic shaking I couldn't control. I saw their messages, I said. It was the only way I could start. Ethan signaled the bartender to bring water, then turned his body to shield me from the room. Who the vendors? My family, I said. On the iPad. They have a group chat. They're laughing at me, at my leg. They're telling everyone Dad paid for the wedding. I looked at him, and the shame finally broke through the shock. I paid for it, Ethan. All of it. $90,000. It was my down payment. They told me Dad's money was tied up in the Midtown project. They signed a promissory note. But in the chat, they said I was desperate. They said I was buying my way in. Ethan didn't gasp. He didn't reach out and hold my hand or offer a tissue. He went very still. His eyes, which had been warm yesterday, turned sharp and dark. He looked like a man watching a structural support beam fail. The Midtown project, he said quietly. Midtown cleared zoning 6 months ago. Your father broke ground last week. He's not illiquid, Mabel. He's flush. The world tilted. The lie wasn't just about cash flow. It was a fabrication. They didn't need my money. They just didn't want to spend theirs. They used mine because it was easier. Because I was easy. Is your name on the contracts? Ethan asked. His voice was different now. It was the voice of a CEO. It cut through the emotional fog. What? The vendors, the venue, the catering, the band. Is your name on the contracts, or did you just wire money to your dad? I paid them directly. I stammered, trying to recall the blur of transactions. Dad didn't want the money hitting his accounts because of the audit. I signed the agreements. The invoices come to my email. Ethan nodded. He pulled a pen from his pocket and opened a fresh page in his notebook. Good, that's leverage. If you signed, you're the client. They work for you. It doesn't matter, I whispered. It's done. The money is gone. The money is spent, Ethan corrected. But the event isn't over, and neither is the liability. He leaned in. Listen to me. You are not a sister right now. You are a creditor. You are the sole investor in a failing venture. You need to stop acting like a family member and start acting like a CEO. What paperwork do you have? Everything, I said. I kept everything. The promissory note, the receipts, the email trails where they promised to pay me back. Where is it? In my room, in a folder, and on my phone. Go get it, he said. Digital copies. Forward everything to a new email address they don't know about. Forward them to me if you want a backup. Then look at the balances. What's outstanding? The bar overage, I said, remembering the text from the morning. And the final gratuities, the overtime for the band. Do not pay another cent, Ethan said. Not one. If I don't, they'll shut down the bar. Let them, he said, or better yet, reassign the billing. We spent the next 20 minutes mapping the battlefield. It wasn't magic, it was bureaucracy. We went through the logic. Deposits were non-refundable, that money was ash. But the power dynamic could be flipped. I wasn't just a guest, I was the owner of the event. I can't cause a scene, I said, the old habit of peacemaking rising up. It's Claire's wedding. They are mocking your disability in a group chat while spending your life savings, Ethan said. He wasn't angry, he was factual. They have already caused the scene. They just think you're too weak to notice. That was the spark. The idea that they counted on my weakness. They counted on the brace making me small. I'm not weak, I said. Then prove it, Ethan said. Document, protect, reclaim. I left him there. I didn't run. I walked back to my room with a steady rhythmic cadence. Step click, step click. My brace sounded like a clock ticking down. I sat at the desk in my hotel room and opened my laptop. I didn't cry. I worked. I forwarded every vendor email to a new Gmail account, Mable Doyle Archive. I printed the invoices. I highlighted the line items billed to Mable Doyle. Payment method. Mable Doyle, ending in 4589. I scanned the promissory note. I drafted a frantic, messy email to a local legal aid clinic asking for a consultation on Monday regarding familial fraud and promissory default. Then I called the wedding planner, Sarah. Hi, Mable, she chirped. Did you get that card for the bar tab? No, I said. My voice was calm. I'm looking at the contract, Sarah. Clause 4.3 states that any overages must be approved in writing by the signatory. Well, yes, but your mother said. My mother is not the signatory, I said. I am. And I am not approving any further charges. If the bar tab hits the limit, you switch to a cash bar. If the band goes 1 minute into overtime, you bill my father, David Doyle. If he refuses, the music stops. Do you understand? There was a stunned silence on the other end. Yes, Mable, but your mother will flip. Then she can pay, I said. Also, Sarah, I need a copy of the final folio printed and ready for me at the end of the night, with zero balance due from me. Okay, Sarah said, her voice small. Okay, Mable. I hung up. I felt a strange vibration in my chest. It wasn't fear, it was power. I went back to the bridal suite. I walked in, and the atmosphere had shifted from frantic to hostile. Claire was in her dress, looking stunning and terrifying. Where have you been? She hissed. I needed water 10 minutes ago. I was handling the business, I said. Whatever, she said, waving a hand dismissively. Just stay out of the way. And Mable? She turned to look at me, her eyes raking over my outfit. I was wearing a navy blue dress that fell to my knees. Can you try to stand behind the bridesmaids in the formal photos, the brace? It just clashes with the aesthetic. It's very industrial. We're going for ethereal garden. The old Mable would have apologized. The old Mable would have promised to hide. The old Mable would have offered to sit out the photos entirely to save Claire the trouble. But the old Mable was dead. She had died in the lobby bar when she learned about the Midtown project. I'll stand where I'm placed, I said. And can you run down and check the place settings? Mom added, not looking up from her makeup mirror. I think they put the wrong napkins at the head table. Run quickly. I can't run, Mom, I said. Remember? She paused, her lipstick hovering over her mouth. She looked at me in the mirror, annoyed. It's a figure of speech, Mable. Don't be difficult. Just go. I didn't go. I stood there. I'm not checking the napkins. I'm going to get dressed. Excuse me? Mom turned around. I'm a guest, I said. I'm not the planner. I'm not the maid. I'm the sister of the bride. I'm going to go put on my earrings. I walked into the bathroom and locked the door. I heard them whispering furiously outside. What is wrong with her? Is she off her meds? She's being so selfish. I looked at myself in the mirror. My face was pale, but my eyes were bright. I wasn't swallowing the poison anymore. I was storing it. I reached into my bag and pulled out the printed invoices, folding them neatly into my clutch. They fit perfectly. I checked my phone. A text from Ethan. I made a call. Compliance at Hale Logistics is flagging the vendor file for Doyle Construction on Monday morning. Just a routine check, but it puts a freeze on new contracts. I typed back, "Thank you." Then another text from him. "Don't set yourself on fire to keep them warm. They're already burning." I put the phone away. I unlocked the door and walked back out. Claire was glaring at me. "You're ruining the vibe," she said. "The day isn't over yet," I replied. I took my place in the procession line. The photographer waved at me. "Sweetie, can you shift to the left?" "Yeah, hide that leg behind the tool. Perfect." I shifted. I hid. I smiled. I let them take their photos. I let them think they had won. I let them think I was the same broken thing they had been kicking for years. But under the silk of my dress, my hand was resting on my clutch, feeling the sharp corner of the stapled papers. They wanted a perfect wedding. I was going to give them a perfect accounting. The reception hall was a testament to what $90,000 looks like when you set it on fire. The ballroom had been transformed into an indoor forest. Massive oak branches draped with white wisteria hung from the ceiling, obscuring the chandeliers, so the light filtered down in soft, expensive pools. The tables were set with crystal glassware that caught the candlelight, fracturing it into rainbows on the heavy linen tablecloths. There was a raw bar with ice sculptures, a 10-piece brass band playing standards, and an open bar stocked with top-shelf liquor. I moved through the room like a ghost. Guests I barely knew. Business associates of my father, distant cousins, friends of Claire's from college, brushed past me, their eyes sliding over me to find someone more important. I heard snippets of conversation that made my stomach turn. "David and Martha really outdid themselves," a man in a tuxedo said, swirling his scotch. "The generosity is staggering. I heard the wine alone cost more than a Honda." "They've always doted on those girls," his wife replied, adjusting her diamond earring. "Such good people." I kept walking. I was holding a glass of sparkling water I didn't drink. I felt like a member of the catering staff who had forgotten her uniform. I found my table. It was table 19, tucked in the back corner near the kitchen doors. The draft from the service entrance hit my bare shoulders every time a waiter breezed through with a tray of filet mignon. My parents and Claire sat at the tiered head table in the center of the room, bathed in a spotlight, laughing and clinking glasses. I was seated with a frantic mother of 3 toddlers, a deaf great-uncle, and 2 of Claire's ex-co-workers who were clearly the B-list invites. I sat down. I placed my clutch on the table. It was heavy with the paper inside. I watched the room celebrate my bankruptcy. I watched my mother bask in the adoration, playing the role of the benevolent matriarch. She looked radiant, unburdened by debt, unburdened by the truth. The dinner service ended and the speeches began. The best man told a raunchy story that made everyone giggle. The maid of honor cried through a poem about sisterhood that felt like a slap across the face considering she had ignored me all day. Then my father stood up. The room went quiet. He held a microphone in one hand and a glass of champagne in the other. He looked every inch the titan of industry, silver hair, tailored suit, a smile that could sell sand in the desert. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice booming and warm. "Tonight is about love. It's about family. It's about the legacy we build and the people we share it with." He spoke about Claire for 5 minutes. He called her his sunlight, his pride, his greatest investment. The crowd cooed. Then he paused. He looked out into the darkness of the room, scanning until his eyes found table 19 in the back corner. "And of course we have Mable," he said. The spotlight didn't move to me, but the attention did. Heads turned. "Mable," he sighed, a sound of theatrical patience. "You know raising 2 daughters is a challenge. One runs ahead and the other needs a little more help keeping up. We all have our burdens to carry, don't we? Some are just heavier and clunkier than others." He gestured vaguely toward my legs. But we love her anyway, he added, flashing a grin that was supposed to be charming. Even if she does ruin the family portraits with all that hardware. The room rippled with laughter. It wasn't raucous laughter. It was polite, comfortable laughter. They thought it was a family in-joke. They thought it was affectionate teasing. They didn't know it was the same language used in the group chat. They didn't know it was the text of my exclusion read aloud over a PA system. I sat frozen. The ice in my water glass melted. I didn't blink. I didn't breathe. I looked at my father and I finally saw him. Not the dad who taught me to ride a bike before the accident. Not the dad I tried to impress with my grades. I saw a man who would sell his daughter's dignity for a laugh from a client. I wasn't watching my sister get married. I was watching my family prove publicly and irrefutably that I was not family. I was a prop. I was a wallet. I was a punchline. My hands started to shake. I placed them flat on the tablecloth to steady them, but the vibration traveled up my arms. Suddenly, a chair scraped back. The sound was loud, harsh, cutting through the lingering chuckles. Ethan Hale stood up. He was at table 4, the VIP table near the front. He didn't look drunk. He didn't look emotional. He looked like he was in a boardroom about to fire a department head. He buttoned his jacket with a slow, deliberate movement. "David," Ethan said. He didn't have a microphone, but his voice was projected from the diaphragm, clear and commanding. "Hold on a second." My father squinted against the spotlight. "Ethan, we're in the middle of toast, son. Save it for the bar." Ethan walked out from behind his table. He moved into the center aisle. He stood tall, looking up at the head table. "I'm not toasting," Ethan said. "I'm correcting the record." The room went deadly silent. The band stopped playing. "For those who don't know me," Ethan said, turning slightly to address the room, then locking eyes back on my father. "I am Ethan Hale, CEO of Hale Logistics. My company is the primary contract partner for Doyle Construction. We value integrity. We value transparency." My father's smile faltered. "Ethan, this isn't the place." "It is exactly the place," Ethan interrupted, his voice sharpening, "because this is where you decided to humiliate the actual financier of this event." A murmur ran through the crowd. My mother stood up, her face pale. "Ethan, please sit down." Ethan ignored her. "I have become aware today that the funds for this wedding, $90,000, were provided by your daughter Mable, under the false pretense of a liquidity crisis you do not have. I know about the Midtown project, David. I know your accounts are fluid." My father looked like he had been struck. He gripped the microphone, his knuckles white. "Furthermore," Ethan continued, his tone turning to ice, "I have personally witnessed and reviewed documented evidence of degrading conduct toward Mable by your family. Mocking a disability is not a joke, it is a character flaw. And in my business, character is a risk factor." He took a step closer to the head table. "As of this moment, the partnership between Hale Logistics and Doyle Construction is under immediate review. All contract renewals are suspended pending a full ethics and compliance assessment. We are pausing all open negotiations. We do not do business with people who treat their own blood like livestock." He didn't scream. He didn't throw a glass. He simply stated policy. And because it was policy, because it was money and reputation on the line, it hit harder than any fist. The room was suffocatingly quiet. You could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Ethan looked at me across the room. He nodded once. "Your turn." I stood up. My legs felt heavy, but the brace locked into place. Click. I picked up my clutch. I walked out from the back corner. The sound of my walking, the slight drag of the left leg, the mechanical rhythm of the carbon fiber echoed on the hardwood dance floor. No one laughed this time. No one looked away. I walked to the front. I didn't look at Ethan. I looked at my father, who was staring at me with a mixture of shock and fury. I looked at Claire, who was gripping her napkin, her eyes wide with terror. I looked at my mother, who was trembling. I didn't take the microphone from my father. I took the one from the stand in front of the band. I pulled it off the clip. "I don't have a toast," I said. My voice shook on the first syllable, but I swallowed and forced it to steady. I have a clarification. I looked at the guests. I paid for this wedding, I said. Every flower, every glass of wine, the dress my sister is wearing. I paid for it with my down payment, with my surgery fund. I heard a gasp from the woman who had praised my parents' generosity earlier. I did it because I wanted to be loved, I continued. I thought if I bought the party, I would get the family. I thought if I solved the problem, I would stop being the problem. I turned to my parents. I looked my father in the eye. But I was wrong. You can't buy respect, and I am done paying for contempt. I opened my clutch. I pulled out the folder. It wasn't thick, but it contained the truth. The promissory note, the invoices, the screenshots of the group chat. I didn't throw it. I didn't put it on a projector. That would have been theatrical, and I was done with their theater. I walked over to Sarah, the wedding planner, who was standing by the cake table looking like she wanted to vanish. I handed her the folder. Sarah, I said into the microphone. This folder contains proof of all payments made by me and the legal promissory note defaulting the debt to David and Martha Doyle. As of this moment, I am closing my checkbook. I pointed to my parents. Any remaining balances, any bar overages, any overtime fees, bill them. If they refuse to pay, turn off the lights. I placed the microphone gently on the floor. It made a soft thud. Mabel, wait, my mother cried out, her voice cracking. You're making a scene. I didn't make the scene, Mom. I said, my voice quiet now, just for them. I just turned on the lights. I turned around. I saw Ethan standing there watching me with a look of fierce pride. I didn't go to him. I didn't need him to hold me up. I walked down the center aisle. The sea of guests parted for me. I held my head up. I let my brace show. I let the sound of my steps ring out. I walked past the open bar I had paid for, past the flowers I had bought, and out the double doors into the cool night air. I didn't look back. I just kept walking. The heavy double doors of the venue swung shut behind me, muffling the music, but not the silence I had left in my wake. The night air was cool and smelled of damp pavement and exhaust, a sharp contrast to the perfumed suffocation of the ballroom. I didn't stop moving. I walked toward the valet stand, my hand gripping my phone, my thumb hovering over the rideshare app. I didn't get far. The doors burst open again. My mother reached me first. She didn't run. She scurried, her heels clicking frantically on the concrete. She grabbed my arm, her fingers digging into the flesh just above my elbow. Mabel, stop, she hissed. Her face was flushed, her eyes wide. She wasn't screaming. She was whispering, terrified that a valet or a smoking guest might hear. You get back in there right now. You pick up that microphone and you tell them it was a joke, a skit. You tell them you're off your medication. I looked down at her hand on my arm. I'm not on medication, Mom. You are ruining her day, she said, her voice trembling with a weaponized fragility. How could you be so selfish after everything we've done for you? We included you. We let you be part of this. You let me pay for it, I said, pulling my arm free. That's not the same thing. My father came next. He didn't whisper. He stormed out, his face a mask of purple rage. He looked smaller than he had on the stage. The spotlight was gone, and without it, he just looked like a man who had been caught. You ungrateful little bitch, he spat. He pointed a finger in my face. Do you have any idea what you just did? You humiliated me in front of my partners, in front of the city. I told the truth, I said. If the truth humiliates you, that's a problem with your conduct, not my speech. I will sue you, he threatened. I will bury you. You think that promissory note means anything? I have lawyers who will tie you up in court until you're begging for scraps. Claire appeared in the doorway. She wasn't storming. She was weeping. It wasn't the pretty single-tear crying she did for the cameras. It was ugly, snotty, gasping sobbing. She looked at me with pure hatred. You stole my wedding, she screamed. It's all about you. It's always about your leg or your pain or your struggle. Just once I wanted a day that was mine. It was yours, Claire, I said quietly. I just wanted you to pay for it. They closed in a wall of noise and demand. For a second, the old instinct flared the urge to fix it, to apologize, to write another check just to make the shouting stop. Then Ethan stepped out of the shadows. He didn't run. He walked with the heavy, inevitable tread of a man who owns the building. He stepped between me and my father. He didn't shove anyone. He just occupied the space, turning his back to me to face them. "David," Ethan said. His voice was bored. "Stop." "This is a family matter, Ethan," my father snarled, though he took a half step back. "Not anymore," Ethan said. "You threatened legal action regarding a debt. That makes it a commercial dispute, and since you threatened my client, Ms. Doyle, I'm stepping in." He pulled his phone from his pocket. "I just got off the phone with my general counsel," Ethan said. He checked the screen. "And my COO. Here is what is going to happen. We aren't going to destroy you overnight. We aren't going to make a scene. We are going to follow procedure." He looked at my father, his eyes dead flat. "On Monday morning, a formal notice of suspension goes out. We are freezing all new purchase orders. We are triggering the termination clauses in our current master service agreement based on reputational risk and ethical non-compliance. We are launching a retrospective audit of every invoice Doyle Construction has submitted to Hale Logistics in the last 5 years. If we find 1 cent out of place, we hand it to the district attorney." My father went pale. The audit was the kill shot. In construction, nobody's books are perfect. An audit meant death by 1,000 cuts. "Ethan, be reasonable," my father stammered. "It was a misunderstanding." "It's bureaucratic," Ethan said, putting his phone away. "That's why it's going to work. You have a good night." He turned to me. "Car's waiting." We left them there on the sidewalk, my mother clutching her pearls, my father staring at his ruin, Claire crying over a party that was already over. We didn't go far. We went to a diner 3 blocks away, a place with fluorescent lights and vinyl seats that smelled like bleach and coffee. It was the opposite of the ballroom. It was exactly what I needed. My cousin Julie was already there. She had slipped out the side door while I was walking down the aisle. Julie had never liked them. She sat in a booth nursing a milkshake. When she saw me, she didn't cheer. She just slid over and patted the vinyl seat. "Move over," she said. "I ordered you fries." I sat down. Ethan sat across from us. The adrenaline crashed. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like grief. I put my head in my hands and I shook. I mourned the family I thought I had. I mourned the version of my sister who I thought loved me. I mourned the years I had spent trying to buy a seat at a table where I was the main course. "It's okay," Ethan said. He didn't reach out to touch me. He respected the boundary. "Let it burn out." "I have nothing," I whispered. "They were my whole life." "They were your employers," Julie said, dipping a fry in ketchup. "And they were terrible bosses. You didn't lose a family, Mable. You quit a bad job." My phone buzzed. It was a text from the florist. "Hey Mable, I heard what happened. I'm so sorry. I can't refund the flowers, obviously, but I'm crediting back the delivery and setup fees to your card. It's about $800. You're a good kid. Keep your head up." A small circle of decency. That's what I had. It wasn't a grand army. It was Julie, Ethan, and a florist who had a conscience. It was enough. I wiped my face with a coarse paper napkin. The grief was still there, heavy and wet, but underneath it was something else. Relief. It felt like clean air entering a room that had been sealed for years. "I need to work," I said. Ethan signaled the waitress for coffee. Now, I said, while I'm angry. I pulled my phone out. I didn't have my laptop, but the phone was enough. I logged into my bank app. I reported the cards I had on file with the vendors as lost, stolen, triggering an immediate freeze and reissue of new numbers. That stopped any last-minute charges Sarah or my mother might try to push through. I opened my email. I changed the password. I set up a 2-factor authentication key linked to a new burner number I bought through an app. I went into my medical portal and removed my mother and Claire from my HIPAA release forms. I deleted them as emergency contacts. I typed in Julie's name instead. Then I opened the file for the promissory note. I drafted a message to the mediation center I had researched. Subject: breach of promissory note, intent to file, to dispute resolution services. Attached: note Doyle, signed, PDF. Body: please initiate formal mediation regarding the attached debt. The debtor has publicly repudiated the obligation and threatened legal harassment. I am seeking immediate repayment of the principal sum of $90,000. I hit send. Revenge wasn't just the scene in the ballroom. Revenge was this. It was admin. It was passwords. It was closing the gates. It was ensuring that when they woke up tomorrow hungover and desperate, they would reach for me and find nothing but a dial tone. Done, I said, putting the phone down. Ethan raised his coffee cup. To the audit. To the audit, I said. I took a sip. It was bitter and burnt, and it tasted better than the champagne ever had. 6 weeks later, the silence in my apartment didn't feel like emptiness. It felt like ownership. It was a Saturday morning. I stood in my kitchen, a space that was barely big enough for 2 people to stand side by side. The coffee grinder screamed as I pressed the button, a jagged mechanical noise that filled the room. I didn't wince. I liked the noise. It was my noise. I poured the grounds into the French press and waited for the water to boil. The sunlight hit the linoleum floor, highlighting the scratches and the dust motes dancing in the air. It wasn't a luxury suite. There were no crystal glasses or floral arrangements worth a mortgage payment. It was just a 1-bedroom walk-up in a zip code my mother used to make fun of, but the rent was paid and the name on the lease was mine. A heavy envelope sat on the counter unopened. It had arrived yesterday via courier, requiring a signature I gave with a steady hand. The return address was a law firm I didn't recognize, not the high-end boutique firm my father used to brag about. This was a mid-tier firm, the kind that handled bankruptcy and damage control. I poured the coffee into a chipped mug and sat down to open it. The letter was 5 pages long, dense with legal jargon, but the summary was clear enough. It was a settlement offer. My parents, specifically the legal entity of Doyle Construction, were offering a repayment plan. They agreed to repay the principal sum of $90,000 over a period of 18 months. There was no interest. There was no apology. In exchange, I had to sign a non-disclosure agreement regarding the internal financial practices of the company and agree to drop the mediation claim. I read between the lines. Ethan's audit had terrified them. The suspension of the Hale Logistics contract had choked their cash flow. They weren't paying me because they loved me or because they felt guilty. They were paying me because I had become a liability they couldn't afford to ignore. It wasn't the perfect justice of a movie. I wasn't getting double my money back. I wasn't getting a tearful reunion where they begged for forgiveness. I was getting my money back in installments like a bad car loan. I picked up a pen and signed. It was messy, but it was real. I sealed the envelope. I was done. A knock came at the door. 3 sharp raps. I walked over and opened it. Ethan stood in the hallway. He wasn't wearing the tailored suit from the wedding. He was wearing dark jeans and a gray t-shirt that had a small oil stain near the hem. He held a paper bag from the Thai place down the street. "Pad Thai," he said. "No peanuts." "Come in," I said. He walked in and set the food on the small table. He saw the envelope. He didn't pick it up, but he nodded at it. "You sign it?" he asked. "I did," I said. 18 months, full principal. "It's a good deal," Ethan said, leaning against the counter. "Considering their liquidity right now, getting anything out of them is a win. My COO tells me they're scrambling to find new suppliers. They're going to survive probably, but they're going to be smaller." "I don't care if they survive," I said. And it was true. The anger had burned itself out, leaving behind a cold, hard indifference. "I just want the checks to clear." Ethan looked at me. The space between us was small, but it wasn't charged with the frantic energy of the wedding night. It was quiet. "I'm heading back to Chicago on Tuesday," he said. "The audit is done. My work here is finished." "Okay," I said. I felt a small pang, but I didn't panic. I wasn't looking for someone to save me anymore. I'd like you to come visit, he said. He didn't step closer. He kept his hands in his pockets. Not for business, just to see the city. There's a museum I think you'd like. And the coffee is better. He wasn't offering me a ring. He wasn't promising to heal my childhood trauma. He was offering a plane ticket and a conversation. He was offering respect. I have work, I said. I used all my vacation days for the wedding. I know, he said. I can wait. I'm good at logistics. I smiled. It was a small smile, but it reached my eyes. I'll check my calendar. You do that. We ate the pad thai out of the cartons. We talked about interest rates and the weather in the Midwest. We didn't talk about my leg. We didn't talk about my sister. When he left an hour later, he didn't try to kiss me. He touched my shoulder, a brief warm pressure, and said, "See you, Mabel. See you, Ethan." After he left, I got ready to go for a walk. I went into the bedroom and changed. I put on a skirt. It was a knee-length denim skirt I hadn't worn in years because my mother said it drew too much attention to the hardware. I sat on the edge of the bed and strapped on the brace. I pulled the Velcro tight. Click, click, click. The sound was familiar, but it didn't sound like a limitation anymore. It sounded like equipment, like armor. I stood up and walked to the full-length mirror on the back of the door. I looked at the woman in the glass. I saw the lines around her eyes from months of stress. I saw the brace black and mechanical against her pale skin. I saw the shoes sturdy and sensible. I didn't flinch. I didn't turn to the side to minimize the profile. I looked her dead in the eye. My family had treated me like an expense line item. They had treated my body like a defect. I had spent $90,000 trying to pay them to forget I was broken. But I wasn't broken. I was solvent. I grabbed my keys. I walked out of the apartment and down the stairs, the sound of my brace echoing in the stairwell, loud and unapologetic. I pushed open the front door and stepped onto the street. The wind hit my face. I didn't hide. I stopped paying to be treated like a person. I became one anyway. Mabel closed the door on the ghosts of her past, the click of the latch sounding like the final turn of a key toward freedom. If you were captivated by Mabel's choice to prioritize her self-worth over her family's approval, hit that subscribe button. Leave a comment below, telling us what you would have done in her place. We read every single comment of your thoughts. Thank you for listening. This has been a story from Revenge Hour. We'll see you next time.